really interesting fight at middleweight. And yes, I said middleweight. We have the hammer Jack Marshman, Wales' own, taking on Tarzan. I mean, just cue up the Baltimore song. Sean Strickland. Matt, this fight's interesting for a whole lot of different reasons. So let's dive into a topic that I bet will get talked about on Fight Week, but maybe not enough. Sean Strickland's been out since 2018. His last win, a knockout over Nordine Taleb in the one and only card that Fight Night Picks covered as Fight Night Picks, and I was the only Fight Night Picks at the time, UFC Moncton. He beat Nordine Taleb quite badly, and that was coming off of a really bad loss against Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos, one of Matt's favorites. One of the wildest spinning wheel kick knockouts you're ever going to see. So for Sean Strickland to pick up a big win over Taleb, very telling. I mean, Strickland, all you have to do, look at the record. Look at the quality of opponents that he's taken on, too. I mean, he was a king of the cage guy for the longest time. Fought Tom Breeze, fought Kamaru Usman, fought Court McGee, and then the Zaleski dos Santos fight. So for Sean Strickland, really getting things done, and I mean, he's faced that level. You're going to lose to Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos. You're going to lose to Kamaru Usman. It's going to happen. For Jack Marshman, one of the lower output guys in the UFC, not known for his takedowns at all so far in his UFC tenure. Former paratrooper. They love to mention that. Got himself in a little bit of hot water taking a fight when he wasn't supposed to. Wasn't really cleared by the paratroopers division. I don't know enough about it. But I will say that he did get himself in hot water at one point in his career for taking a fight when he wasn't supposed to. But this guy's incredibly tough, incredibly durable, and he's got sneaky power, Matt.
He does. And Jack Marshman, a guy who I saw fight live in the second UFC fight I had ever seen live. He had fought Thiago Santos live in Halifax, and he made a pretty good account of himself. Yeah, he got beat up the first part of the fight, but he did drop Thiago in that, so he has that. That's something you can tell your grandkids. I dropped Thiago Santos in a fight. I wouldn't tell them how the fight ended, because he does get wheel kicked in the second round, but he at least did have a few good moments in that fight. Jack Marshman is a really weird story because he's in that weird tweener club where you don't have a crazy high output, but you don't really have the power to just rely on your one shot and pot shot people. Whereas Sean Strickland, if he stands at range, he's got a lot of those kind of probing tools. And Sean Strickland, he did sort of the Alexander Volkov. He's like, hey, I'm tall and thin. What if I just gain more weight? It might work. And for Alexander Volkov, we saw that add a lot more pop to his shots, like we saw in the Ontiveros fight. If Sean Strickland did add a lot more power as he moved up to 185, I think he'd be a real problem.
So, Matt, this picture that we have on the right-hand side of Sean Strickland, that's an old picture from when he was at 170. I'm going to queue up right now a picture of Sean Strickland at 185 from his Instagrams with Johnny Walker. And I mean, holy f***, look at this f***ing guy. He's a brick f***ing shit. Sean f***ing Strickland.
He's big.
Holy smokes. So, you got Sean Strickland looking like a dime, coming in at 85, and I mean, there was a lot of buzz around Strickland at 70. Again, you lose to Usman, you lose to Zaleski dos Santos, that happens. But as far as the metrics so far in his young UFC career, they're quite good. He's on the right side of 30 to this point. Not that Jack Marshman's over the hill by any means at 30. The weird fight for me, the Jack Marshman saga that's been in the UFC, again, Ryan James, Antonio Carlos Jr., again, the fight against Thiago Santos, he loses to Robertson. He beats John Phillips, which was a really weird fight, and then he loses to Edmund Shavazian. So there's that. The fight that I want to go back to is a fight against John Phillips. That fight is not one that you're going to want to go back and watch, but it was like one of those grind him out type of fights. It was a fight where you thought, oh, well, these guys are going to swing. It's a weird fight where it's a clash of whales. It didn't go like that, and it was actually it was a pretty boring fight. For Sean Strickland, an all-action type of guy, a guy that a lot of people expect to get the finish, I think this has like sneaky chance of becoming either a fight of the night or performance of the night. And there's a lot of really sneaky fights. This is one of them. So we look at the votes over in Topology. 674 so far, 90% going with Sean Strickland. If we have a look at the odds, Sean Strickland opened a minus 260 favorite. The line popped up to a point where Sean Strickland minus 200. He's now the minus 313 favorite average on best fight odds. Jack Marshman opened a plus 220. He's now at a plus 246. What does Jack Marshman have to do to overcome a 90% fan vote on Sean Strickland? That doesn't really mean anything. And the overwhelming odds being in Sean Strickland's favor. For Jack Marshman to get a win here, just absolutely canceling out everything we said. What does he have to do here?
So he's going to have to close the range and kind of fight Sean Strickland like Kamaru Usman did. Now, not in the same way that Kamaru Usman did, because I don't think Jack Marshman can go out there and just put on an absolute cardio kind of a fight where it's just, I'm in your face, I'm trying to take you down, I'm throwing a bunch of volume. But no, close the distance. If Sean Strickland's able to just keep on using his jab, really set up his timing from a distance and force you to kind of lunge in at him, he can catch you with shots coming in all day long. He's got really good straight punches coming down the middle, and he's not a guy who has to wind up a crazy amount on his shots. What's a good example? Like Paulo Costa, yeah, he hits really hard, but he does have this big wind-up where if you are a guy like an Israel Adesanya, now it's hard to compare Adesanya to either of these guys, but if you're a guy who has really good footwork and head movement and you're a really high-level striker, you can work your way around that. For Sean Strickland, Jack Marshman does like to kind of pull up on his shots and put a lot into them, and if he is starting to try to knock out Strickland with every big shot, lunging into them, I think Strickland can probably finish him. I do think he can catch him on the way in, but that is what Marshman has to do. Force Strickland to be really uncomfortable, get his back up against the cage, really use your size, because yes, Sean Strickland looks big, and he's a big guy now at 185, but Jack Marshman is going to be cutting a lot more weight to make this weight class. Physically, just frame-wise, he is a little bit thicker, so if he can wear on Sean Strickland, really make him feel uncomfortable and show him what kind of middleweights feel like in the UFC, I think he can make him uncomfortable and maybe start to steal rounds from here and there, but I think as long as this is sort of a technical fight on the outside, it's Sean Strickland's to lose.
And I mean, for Jack Marshman, I know you might check a couple sites. It says he's at Artillery Combat MMA. I put him as being at a Shore, or out from... I put him as from being out of Shore MMA with Jack Shore and his dad, and he does train there quite a bit, so it's kind of neat. For Sean Strickland, he's been a King's MMA guy for a really long time. So for training partners, but Benny and the Jets, Benil Dariush, but Marvin Vittori, Giga Chikadze, Rafael Cordero being the head coach, but also for this camp, he spent time at Syndicate MMA and a couple of different gyms in the States. And I mean, two big training partners from those gyms, Johnny Walker and Michelle Pajeda. And if I know anything, those guys are absolute wild cards. But definitely good to be training with guys like that, especially ahead of a fight like this. I like Sean Strickland as far as being a very dynamic striker. And when you're facing a guy like Jack Marshman, it definitely is. And I know fan vote and odds now will consider them a little bit. You look at them that way, this is Sean Strickland's fight to lose. I definitely think there's an opportunity for Jack Marshman to win. And that's why I wanted to go that route. I just don't really see it in this one. For Marshman to win, you definitely have to back up Sean Strickland. So if you see after the first round, Jack Marshman's really closing distance and doing a good job of it, maybe the live bet's an option. But I really do like Sean Strickland in this one. He's a bit too much of a favorite for my taste. Maybe he's a parlay piece, but I like Strickland in this fight.
You go with skills over size every single time, and I do think Sean Strickland's the more skilled out of the two, so it's just really hard to pick against him in this one.
Matt, both of us going with the return of Baltimore's Tarzan. Great tune. Sean Strickland, Dustin Pedroia's walk-up song. I'm really looking forward to this fight, Matt. At 185 pounds, should be a great one. We have a 185-pound main event between Uriah Hall and Anderson Silva that you're not going to want to miss. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.